Uh, the message today is going to be a metaphor, parable, if you will. And I'm going to share the parable and in that share application of it. I don't want you, as is the case when Jesus taught in parables, it's easy to get lost in the parable itself rather than to understand the teachings that go along with it. Now, different from Jesus, I'm going to be explaining as we go along what the parable means. But I want you to understand that parables are a great way to teach. I'm just not really good at them, so this may not work at all. So bear with me as I try to share a message visually, but also in using metaphor. Jeremiah 6:16. Thus says the Lord, stand by the ways, seek and ask for the ancient paths, where the good way is, and walk in it, and you shall find rest for your souls. The oldest real road in the United States is Route 66. You see a portion of it there. It was built in the 20s, and I want you to understand the transition from wagon, train, and stagecoach paths to highways or roads, paved roads. That's what it represented. And originally, Route 66 went from Chicago all the way to what now is Santa Monica Pier in California. That was the way that you went west, at least by automobile. What you see there, and by the way, Oklahoma has more miles of Route 66. We're very blessed. There's tremendous Americana. Briefly about the road, it was built, like I say, in the 20s. It was, by the 50s, people had transitioned to interstates, and the road began to die, and the towns that depended on the road began to die. And within the last 20, 25 years, there's been a resurgence because there's so much Americana along Route 66. There's so much. In fact, if you've seen the movie Cars, that's the basic premise of it, is what happens when the roads that connected towns now are bypassed by interstates. This is a section of the original Route 66 from up near Miami. And you'll notice it's one lane. It's 9 feet across. And it was for about 10 miles, that's all in that area we could afford. It was one lane with gravel on the sides. So if two Model Ts met each other, they could both go down onto the gravel and then come back. But it basically was a one-lane road. Now, this is just a section of it because, like I say, that's all that could be afforded. But you'll notice the imprint down at the bottom that it's Route 66. In America, if you're going to go for the old paths, that's where it's going to lead you. If you're going to go for the old road, it's called the Mother Road. And by the way, Tulsa is called the capital of the Mother Road. If you care about old stuff, glitchy stuff, you'd love Route 66. But we are so close to it, it's easy for us to take it for granted. But there's a story of two guys who decided they were going to take a trip on Route 66, okay? That's me on the right, my buddy Ted, who was here a couple of weeks ago. Ted has been probably the best friend I've ever had in my life. Now, a little backstory before we go through this parable. Ted and I, our senior year, decided we knew we were going to go separate ways. Where he was going to go in the fall after we graduated, where I was going to go was going to take us down 2 different roads. And so we decided our senior year, we're going to each get a motorcycle, and we're going to spend the summer seeing as much of the United States as we could, our own adventure. And so we each decided we're going to get a Harley-Davidson Sportster in black because that's the only acceptable paint color for Harley-Davidson, although you see that one's yellow. And we saved up all year. We were going to skip by the side of the road, which you could do back in those days. We're going to pack 2 or 3 changes of clothes, and we were going to head out to California, go up the West Coast, go over towards Chicago, just see as much as we could, and as much as our money lasted, etc. Now, for a reason I won't get into, ended up Harley-Davidson couldn't get the motorcycles built, all right? So we started this thing like in October, and by spring we had realized we're not gonna get them with enough time to break them in before we hit the highway. Got into summer, we still couldn't get the motorcycles. And so it's what I called for years my lost summer, because it was a real dream for both of us being able to do that. Weren't able to do that. And he and I reconnected about 2 years ago, and I said to him, first time we reconnected, you know, you move off. He had moved to Atlanta, we'd moved to Seattle, you build families, you lose connection. And when we reconnected, I said, hey, how would you feel about taking a adventure on Route 66? And he said, are you serious? I said, yeah. He said, now you're not talking about sleeping on the side of the road, are you? I said, sure. No. Are you crazy? No. And so he said, let me talk to my wife, talk to his wife. At that time, he didn't have a bike. He ended up getting that Honda that you see there. And so this thing came together. And as we were on the road, we stayed at the old Clichy motels, like from the 50s. And I can, excuse me, see how choked up I'm getting about this? We wanted to do the Route 66 experience. I'm not emotional, I'm losing my voice. That means staying to the old Route 66. There's Route 66 and there's original Route 66. And then there's spurs off that, and I'll get to that in a moment. I actually downloaded an app that would help us stay on the route. In 1982, I believe, the U.S. government decertified Route 66. And so each state had to do whatever they wanted with their section. Now in Oklahoma, it comes under several different highways. But there are signs to show you that you're on historic Route 66. The problem is these signs get stolen because people want a souvenir. And so I downloaded an app that guaranteed to keep you on the original Route 66 without running into dead ends, which sometimes it does, without getting off, because you don't necessarily know, and it's not marked very well when you veer off the highway you're on to stay on Route 66. Sometimes there are signs, a lot of times they're not, because they've been stolen. Okay? So the app was going to send us down these roads. Now, in Tulsa's done a great job of this. If you go down 11th Street in Tulsa, you're on Route 66. We went north, picked it up at Catoosa because there's a big blue whale. Has anybody seen the big blue whale in Catoosa? Okay. If you, Route 66 travel guys, and you go there and it's a big, kind of a macrame blue whale, and it's a total letdown, but you're supposed to see it, okay? We caught it there, and we took it all the way through Tulsa, and you can go almost all the way through Oklahoma without getting on the interstate. And it takes some work. But I didn't realize, all the times I've gone down I-40, I didn't realize Route 66 went through all the way through Tulsa, all the way down to Sapulpa and on out west, and you don't ever have to leave the route. Now, you're going to go through every town on the way. So you'll see Tulsa's done really good things about and if you go down 11th Street, you're going to see some of the glitchy old stuff, like this old gas station. Here's an old motel, and that's the kind of motels we stayed in. If you want more information about that, I can tell you why you don't want to go to these motels, because rarely does the air conditioning work. And anyway, that's a totally different story. Here's a Medigold, and it's become a monument. This is all on 11th Street. And but here's kind of what the road looks like, and if you'll see, there's a little bit of a curb on the sides. That's how you'll know you're on the original, because they laid those curbs, and then they had a machine that sat on that would grade the dirt to make the bed for coming in. So that's how they started it there on the side. The road is rough. Most of the place, speed limit is generally no more than 55. On a motorcycle, you don't want to do more than 55, or you'll end up leaving your seat, and I'll show you that in a moment. Now, this is a metaphor. What I want you to understand about this is clinging to the old paths isn't easy. And I don't mean just clinging to them. I mean the road is rough. Okay? And that's what makes the old paths a challenge. This road is 100 years old. We were in places, and we would you could imagine, because it's so narrow, you could imagine, in some places, it's so narrow, you could imagine two Model Ts passing and not much space in between. But because it's 100 years old and it's been patched and all of that kind of stuff, we really had to watch the road for potholes. They would come in and patch where there's joints, and those patches would raise up because of the sun. And now there's more than a dozen times we came up out of our seats going over these, and you're having to really watch the road. It is tough. The road is tough. And that's why Jesus taught narrow is the gate. And I'd never thought about the gate before until I'm trying to follow this app to find out where it goes next, because I'm telling you there were some turns that it looked like a driveway. And you're coming off a renewed Route 66 onto an old Route 66, and there was no sign. Now, once you got down the road, you would see one of those historic signs, but you had to know how to make that turn because you're going off one road onto another, yet that's the continuation of the original road. This road is not easy. Now, here out in western Oklahoma and into Texas, you see the road on the left. It looks like the service road to I-40. That's I-40 on your right. That's actually the original Route 66. That's 100 years old. That's 55 miles an hour. And I'm telling you, out in western Oklahoma, you'll travel that about 8 miles. Then you have to go over the interstate to then pick it up and go another 8 miles, and then you may have to come back. Staying on the road was tough. Not only that, and guys, the whole idea, when you're on a motorcycle, you got time to think. The whole idea of this metaphor came when I'm riding down this road and I'm watching people. We can only do 55. Trust me, we didn't want to do any more than that because you're going to see some of the spots. But I'm watching these folks go 75 miles an hour, just yards away from where we were, and they're missing everything. And what I mean by missing everything, guys, this was an adventure because the people we met, the things that we saw, because we stopped. And that was the goal. Here's part of it. You can see how rough it is. This is out in West Texas. Narrow is the gate to get on this road, and it's a tough road. What Jesus called us to was a tough road. Now, there's all kinds of benefits, and we're going to talk about that, but the road is tough. We're not on a super highway. Broad is the way that leads to destruction. Narrow is the way that leads to life. And not only is it narrow, and a challenge to find, listen to me, a challenge to find. That's true of historic Route 66. That's true of salvation. And once you get on there, staying on there is a challenge, okay? It is a tough thing. It's a tough life in many ways. It's an incredibly blessed life in so many ways. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And many are those who, and I was thinking about all these people just zooming by. Guys, on Route 66, we would go for hours and not even pass anybody. And you're watching all of these cars and trucks just zooming by because they've taken the easy path and the fast path that's missing everything if you understand from our perspective. Here's some of it in West Texas. Now, when the United States decertified Route 66, Texas gave up on it. Well, that's not fair, but you can see traveling down roads like that are a challenge. It's not only the condition of the road itself, it's what's going to jump out in front of it. So you don't want to do more than a 55. Second thing I want you to know about this narrow is the way is you need a compass. Now, I told you about downloading an app. And guys, even with the app, there were probably half a dozen times we had to turn around because I missed it saying you're coming up on this stop, and it says turn here, and I don't see you here to turn at. And we have to turn around, and yeah, there it is. And you're going off into the outback, you know. but you need a compass. And that's what this is. Guys, you can get on the road, but the only way you're going to stay on the road is if you have a description of where the road is going and how to stay on it. Because there are turns in the road. There are bumps in the road. There are stops in the road. And there's a lot of opportunities to leave the road. In fact, there's more opportunities to leave it than to stay on it. It's a challenge to stay on. And without an app, an application, without a compass, without a guide, you're going to fall off the road. And you got to stay to it. And it's a challenge because this, I'm having to watch this app and I'm having to trust it because it doesn't feel right. Wait a minute, it feels like we're going north. We're supposed to be going west. Trust the app. And that's the same thing here. And that's one of the concerns I have about living in a culture that says, follow your heart. Hearts are incredibly misleading. Apps, you have to trust. And you have to trust it when there's no signs that you can see. But this is the way to go. There's no signs it's telling you. Only your app is telling you. Only your guide, only your compass is telling you. And faith is trusting the app when it doesn't feel right. You see, you need an app. This is part of Route 66. There's parts of it that lead to a dead end. I was telling you, sometimes you have to cross I-40, and it keeps you from, because it actually runs down both sides in parts. You have to kind of go back and forth to stay on Route 66, or you'll go 7 miles and find this, and then you have to turn around. And that was one of the reasons I downloaded the app. At first, I thought, hey, this is going to be an adventure. Let's just go find some Route 66 signs. Guys, we wouldn't have made it out of Catoosa because we didn't have a Bible showing us where to go. Because it can lead to places like this. How many folks end up, their lives is a dead end? Because they don't follow the app. Or they didn't think to download the app. They don't have a guide. Right before Phil Robertson died, one of the last public proclamations he made was, America has lost its way because America doesn't know why it's here. America has no app. America has no compass. If you have no compass, life will end up in a dead end. I guarantee you. And how many dead ends? How many times do you open your news feed and you read about another suicide? Of celebrities, of people who apparently, of influencers, people who apparently have, of K-pop stars, all kinds of folks that apparently have it all going on. They don't have an app. They don't have a guide. They don't know how to navigate wealth. They don't know how to navigate relationships. They don't know how to navigate at a young age people using them and abusing them. They don't have a guide. I read about one this morning, age 24, killed herself. She was a Miss America contestant from Jamaica. At age 24, killed herself. No app. No guide, no compass, no Bible. What a waste at age 24. Whether you turn to the right or the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. How do you know? How do you know it's the way? How do you know we need to make this turn? Or how do you know, oops, we should have made that turn? When you have a guide. And that's the importance of the guide. That's why he says, thy word is a lamp to my feet and a guide to my path. And woe to anybody who doesn't have that lamp and that guide. Where are they going to end up in? Guys, when it's dark and you're lost, where do you end up? I'm riding on Route 66, having a great adventure. And as I told Ted, we should have done this 50 years ago. We tried. And what I'm thinking about is how many people are running down I-40 in a rush to get to nowhere. And in the process, they're missing everything. Thy word is a lamp. Now, it's a tough road, and you need an app, but there are incredible rewards. This is the hardest thing for you and me to describe to non-Christians of the joy of being a Christian, because there are millions of quote-unquote little things. What the word serendipity means. Serendipity refers to the fortunate phenomenon of making happy and unexpected discoveries by accident. Essentially, good luck in finding valuable or pleasant things when you're not looking for them. It's the process of stumbling upon something wonderful and useful by chance while engaged in another activity or looking for something else entirely. Weeks before we left, I was talking to Ted on the phone. I said, how do you want to do this? Do you want me to put an agenda together of where we're going to try to make it this way, this way, this way? Or do you want to just head out and see what happens? And he said, I'd like to just kind of head out and see what happens with no agenda, no timetable. And that's perfect, because man, I went on vacation with my dad, and it's always, you got to be here by this time, and it was so stressful and all that. And it was just head out and see what happens. And that was the idea, I think, originally behind the adventure. And so that's what we did. Originally, we wanted to try to make it to Arizona because there is a Eagle song standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona. Such a fine sight to see, a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford slowing down to take a... Some of you are mouthing this with me. And we wanted to make it to Winslow because they have set up that corner. They have a bronze statue of Glenn Fry. They have a flatbed truck, and there's actually an association that takes care of it. And that was our original goal. We made it to Amarillo. Fell way short. Part of it is, right before we went, we learned that Ted's wife was going to have surgery, so we had to cut the thing short. But the idea, and that was just kind of, if we get there, let's see if we can get there and get back. The idea wasn't to see how far we could get. The idea was, how many adventures can we have? And everything's a serendipity. If you go down I-40, you can see Lucille's, and that doesn't mean anything to you unless you stop and understand who she was and what this represents. One of the oldest gas stations on Route 66. Here's a place, we stopped at a town, had one diner. We were starved, sat down to eat. Great people. We ended up spending an hour there just talking with the folks, and the waitress and the owner of it is a great place. And across the street from that was this. And I went over and said, Ted, hang on, I want to go get a picture of this. This is a serendipity. This is when you stop and take the time and follow the app, you find things you never would have thought. And so I see this old gas station and covered in all these signs. And I just love these old tin signs. So I walk over there and I hear noise on the inside. And so I go up and underneath the awning, and the door's open, there's a screen door. And so I walk inside, and there is a semicircle of chairs. There's an old man in coveralls with two guitars on stands, and he's just sitting there. Nobody else in the place. And it's just covered with Route 66 Klitsch and Mobil Oil old, and S&H green stand and stuff. And we ended up spending an hour there just talking to this guy. Turns out, and who are the chairs for? He said, well, in the evening, town folk come here, and we just kind of pick and grin. Well, how'd you get into the picking? And he started showing us pictures of, he was a musician. Now, he never became famous, but he was always able to make his living at music. And he was a good musician, and his wife was a singer, and she had died several years before, and he was talking about his adventures, and we were sitting there listening to it, and I'm sitting here thinking, I walked over here to get a picture of this thing, and now we've spent an hour with this amazing guy talking about his life, and what a blessing, and yada, 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 yada. That's the challenge. When you follow the app, life works. And you have so many blessings that you can't describe. You can't tell someone, if you get on this path, you're going to see this, you're going to see that, because they're going to have their own serendipity. But part of the reward of choosing the narrow way is God blesses and blesses and blesses. And sometimes he blesses in ways that you don't even see as a blessing until you've experienced it. And you wouldn't have experienced it had you not walked in his path. Am I making sense? And guys, this trip was full of that. That's why we only made it to Amarillo. It's because we're listening to this guy we've never heard of, never met, for an hour, and we're looking around this place, and Ted said, "This is quite a shop you've got here." And he said, "This is not a shop. This is my life. This is not for sale." And it was like, pardon us, you know. And he sits there and waits for people to come and talk to him or play his guitar for him. What a blessing it was. And we just stopped there to get something to eat. Now, we were on the old path, and there are spurs off that, and we had taken several of these. And they are terrible, terrible. Many places Route 66 is rough. These spurs are really rough. And the app says, all right, if you want to stay on the original, you need to exit here. And it just kind of loops around and comes back to the main road. And we had taken 2 of those. And I mean, it was all the way. And we come up on the 3rd one. And, and I stop, put my blinker on stop. And Ted pulls up next to me. And I understand there's no traffic. And I said, "It says turn here." And he said, "Do we want to do this again? Every one of these just beating the snot out of us. Do we want to do this again?" I said, "Ted, we want the Route 66 experience." So we go down this very narrow, and we come up on this sign. We had to pull over because I could see from a distance. And we pulled over, and this is not far from Arcadia. And this is where Paul McCartney stopped to ask directions. Out in the middle, and we would never have found this. And guys, it's so many things like this. We never would have found it had we not followed the app, had we not followed the way. We actually talked to the guy who was the son. When Paul McCartney was 66 years old, he drove Route 66. He didn't have an app because there wasn't one back then. And he got on a spur of 66 and didn't know where he was. And he pulled over, and this guy was out working in his front yard. And he walks over, and he says, "Can you tell me how?" And he says, "Yeah, just follow the rest of the road, and you'll be back on it. By the way, are you who I think you are?" And he said, "Yeah, probably so." And so this guy erected this, this historic marker. We weren't going to try to find a place that Paul McCartney had pulled over. Not that that's significant. What I'm trying to illustrate is when you follow the path, you run into all kinds of things you could never imagine, but are a blessing. So we had to get off our motorcycles and each of us get a picture standing beside, a place where Paul McCartney had stopped. We weren't looking for that. We had so many serendipity. This is not an advertisement for Route 66. This is lessons learned from a path less traveled. Life is a journey, but it's also a destination. Everybody on I-40 is trying to get to a destination. And from the perspective of Radiator Springs cars, they're missing life. It's a journey. Heaven is our ultimate goal. You can travel I-40 and you can go fast. You can speed on, brother, and get to where you're going. And in the process, you're going to miss America. You really will. Now, that's what it was built for. It's built to bypass all these towns that we went through. It's to bypass so you can get from point A to point B fast. And in the process, you miss America. Part of the problem with the wide road is that it misses life. And if you miss life, that leads to destruction. Or you can travel Route 66 and see the beauty of the world. And I can't describe it to you. You really have to experience. then you would experience it differently than I would. You have to be present in the moment. Like Matthew 6:34 said, therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble on its own. One of the things I want you to get out of this is that there are opportunities all around us. There are amazing things to experience. Brothers and sisters, the road that Jesus called us to is narrow, and the gate's narrow. You have to search to find it. You got to search to stay on it. But it's an incredible road. It's a beautiful life. There's amazing things all around. God made an amazing world for us to enjoy that glorifies Him. And He wants us to take each day at a time and learn what each day has for us. Seize the day. It's a struggle to find Route 66. It's a struggle to stay on Route 66. It is so worth the effort to do that. And day by day, seize the opportunity. Stop and talk to Lucille's descendants. Stop at a diner that you would never eat out at and find people that are just in their usualness. They're awesome. Seize the day. Enjoy the path. Yes, it's a challenging path, but that challenge is so filled with serendipity. And God wants your life to be a blessing, not a curse. Now, because of sin, life is a struggle on this planet. That doesn't mean it is to be disgraced. It's to be honored, because life is worth living. As Dylan Thomas wrote, do not go gently into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage against the dying of the light. Live with purpose. Live with passion. Live with meaning. Follow the app that will give all of those things. And then watch for blessing after blessing after blessing that you never could have anticipated. You were not seeking, but God has blessed you with because He's put it in your path. Narrow is the gate. Narrow is the way. It is the only path to walk. It is the only path that leads us to the ultimate destination that we're seeking. And on the way, on that path, you experience life in the world that God wants you to be blessed by. What path are you walking on? There's a great thing about Route 66. When you miss your cutoff and the app tells you, you can turn around and you can get back on the road. If you have wandered away, if you have been enticed by the speed and the directness of I-40, I want to invite you back to Route 66. Yes, it's bumpy. Yes, it's only 55 miles an hour. But you see everything that God wants you to see and everything that is worth seeing rather than bypassing it for something that only leads to destruction. Can we help you in that walk?